Imagine surfacing a German U-boat in 1942 and finding a party. The American coast wasn't a fortress, it was lit up like a carnival. Drivers stopped to watch ships burn, and tourists danced while tankers exploded just offshore. Welcome to the second happy time, when the war came to the beach. January 12th, 1942. The North Atlantic, 40 miles off the coast of Long Island, New York. The air inside the iron hull of U-123 tasted of recycled diesel, unwashed bodies, and damp wool. It was a thick, oily taste that coated the back of the throat, the specific flavor of claustrophobia. For weeks, the 52 men aboard had lived in this steel tube, battling the freezing gales of the North Atlantic crossing. They were exhausted, battered by winter storms, and operating on the fraying edge of adrenaline. Captain Lieutenant Reinhard Hardigan wiped a film of condensation from the brass housing of the attack periscope. The control room was silent, save for the hum of the electric motors and the rhythmic ping of the hydrophones. They were running, submerged, creeping toward the enemy coast. Hardigan whispered, "Depth, periscope depth." The command was repeated by the plainsmen, their hands steady on the wheels. The boat tilted slightly, rising through the black water. Hardigan pressed his eyes to the rubber cups of the optic. He expected darkness. He expected the terrified, total blackout he had seen off the coast of Britannia coastline, terrified into submission, where a single struck match could bring down the wrath of the Luftwaffe. He expected patrols, destroyers, and the cold, dark silence of a nation at war. Instead, he saw a sunrise. "Navigator," Hardigan murmured, not pulling his eyes away. "Check our position. Are we truly off New York?" The navigator confirmed, "Jawohl, Herr Kalun. Dead reckoning puts us right off the Montauk Point." Hardigan spun the periscope 360 degrees. It wasn't a sunrise. It was the glow of a civilization that didn't believe it could be touched. To the west, the horizon was burning with a steady, amber luminescence. It was the collective light of millions of street lamps, neon signs, car headlights, and dance halls. He ordered the boat to surface. As the U-123 broke the water, Hardigan scrambled to the bridge. Before him lay the coast of America, and it was lit up like a carnival. The navigation buoys were flashing their cheerful, rhythmic warnings. Lighthouses swept the ocean with powerful beams, helpfully illuminating exactly where the treacherous shoals lay. And beyond them, the sky glowed with the artificial daylight of New York City and the coastal boardwalks. The first watch officer muttered, "It's madness. Don't they know we are here? Don't they know there is a war?" Hardigan laughed, a sharp, barking sound. "They think the ocean is a moat, number one. They think the war is something that happens in Europe." He pointed a gloved hand toward the shore. "Look at that. You can see the Ferris wheels. You can practically see the cars driving along the coast road." But it wasn't the cars that interested the U-boat captain. It was what lay between his boat and those lights. Cruising parallel to the shore, oblivious and unescorted, was a heavy tanker. It was steaming comfortably, its navigation lights burning bright red and green. But even if the ship had been blacked out, it wouldn't have mattered. The massive glow from the city behind it cast the ship in a perfect, razor-sharp silhouette. It was a black cutout against a wall of light. "They are serving it to us on a silver platter," Hardigan whispered. The tension of the crossing evaporated, replaced by the cold, predatory calculation of a hunter who realizes the prey has no idea it is being hunted. "Clear the bridge for action. Open tube 1. Target bearing 040. Range 2,000 meters. Speed 12 knots. He looked at the glowing horizon one last time. The Americans were still dancing in the clubs of Manhattan, driving with their high beams on and sleeping in warm beds. They had left the front door unlocked and the lights on. Tube 1. Loss. The U-boat shuddered as the torpedo left the tube. The explosion didn't sound like war. It sounded like a heavy steel door slamming shut deep underwater, followed milliseconds later by a roar that tore the surface of the Atlantic apart. A geyser of water, heavy crude oil, and twisted steel erupted against the backdrop of the neon skyline. The tanker broke its back instantly. A fireball rolled upward, thick and greasy, turning the night into a gruesome parody of day. On the bridge of U-123, the glare was intense enough that Hardigan could see the stubble on his watch officer's chin. Hardigan didn't lower his binoculars. He was waiting for the reaction. He waited for the coastal searchlights to sweep the water, for the air raid sirens to wail across Long Island, for the fast, angry shadows of US Navy destroyers to come charging out of the dark. But there was nothing. On the shore, the lights of the boardwalks didn't even flicker. The cars continued to drive along the coastal highway, their headlights cutting bright cones through the salt mist. In fact, some cars were slowing down. Hardigan realized with a jolt of disbelief that they were pulling over. The drivers were getting out to watch. To them, the burning ship wasn't an act of war. It was a spectacle. "They are not dousing the lights," the quartermaster said. "They are watching the show." Hardigan turned away from the burning wreck. "Save the torpedoes. We will use the gun for the next one. We are in a shooting gallery, gentlemen. No need to waste expensive eels when the targets are sitting ducks." This was the beginning of what the U-boat crews would come to call the second happy time. For the next few months, the eastern seaboard of the United States became the deadliest stretch of water on Earth. The tactic was ruthlessly simple. The U-boats would surface at night and position themselves between the open, dark Atlantic and the coast. When a merchant ship approached, it would pass between the U-boat and the shore, appearing as a crisp, solid black cutout against the glowing haze of the cities. 2 nights later, off the coast of Cape Hatteras, the scene repeated itself with sickening regularity. Hardigan's crew stood on the wet, rolling deck, the deck gun aimed. The air smelled of cordite and the rot of the swampy land breeze blowing off the Carolinas. "Target, tanker, 3,000 tons," the officer called out. "She's lit up like a Christmas tree." "Fire," Hardigan said. The deck gun cracked, the recoil shaking the pressure hull. The shell slammed into the waterline of the merchant ship. It was less a naval battle and more an execution. By late March, the shallow waters from New York to Cape Hatteras were littered with twisted metal. The beaches were black with oil sludge, and still, the lights burned. But as the weeks dragged on, the element of surprise began to fade in the north. Destroyers began to appear. Patrol planes started forcing the U-boats down during the day. Hardigan, staring at a map in the cramped wardroom, traced a line further south. "The north is waking up," he said. "But down here, I'll wager they are still sleeping. Set course for the Gulf. Let's see if the lights are still on in New Orleans." By May 4, 1942, in the Gulf of Mexico, south of the Mississippi River Delta, the war had changed temperature. The bone-chilling frost of the North Atlantic was gone, replaced by a suffocating, tropical heat that turned the steel tube of the U-boat into a floating oven. But if the conditions inside were hell, the world outside was paradise. As the U-boat broke the surface of the Gulf, the water cascaded off the hull, glowing with a brilliant, neon-green phosphorescence. The captain climbed to the bridge, his shirt unbuttoned. He raised his binoculars, scanning the northern horizon where the mouth of the great Mississippi River emptied into the sea. He lowered the glasses, his jaw tightening. "It is exactly the same," he whispered. "They haven't learned a damn thing." The horizon was a glittering necklace of light. The coastal resorts of Louisiana and Mississippi were in full swing. The glow of dance halls, hotels, and casinos reflected off the calm, flat water, creating a highway of light that led straight to the shore. "Captain," the watch officer said, pointing to the starboard bow. "Look, just there." A massive tanker was sliding through the glassy water, silhouetted so clearly against the shore lights that they could identify the company flag painted on its funnel. It was moving lazily, barely making 10 knots. "They are treating the war like a rumor," the captain muttered. This was the Gulf shooting gallery. The U-boats had found that the deeper they went into American waters, the less the Americans seemed to care. "Tube 1. Ready. Fire." The torpedo hissed into the warm water, leaving a straight, bubbling trail of phosphorescence. The impact was cataclysmic. The tanker, laden with thousands of tons of aviation fuel, didn't just explode, it disintegrated. A pillar of fire erupted 1,000 feet into the air, turning the night sky a violent, bruising purple. On the shore, the music in the dance halls likely didn't stop. "Hard to starboard," the captain ordered. "Reload tube 1. As they circled the burning wreck, the captain shook his head. "It's absurd. We are burning their fuel, sinking their ships, and killing their men within sight of their beaches. And they still leave the lights on for us." He looked at the shore one last time. The lights of a car moved slowly along a coastal road, bright and happy. "They will wake up eventually," the captain said. "But until they do, we will burn the whole Gulf down." But the change, when it finally came, was absolute. By July 19th, 1942, off the coast of Cape Hatteras, Capitan Lieutenant Hardened stood on the bridge of U-123 once more. But this was not the same darkness he had stared into back in January. Tonight, the horizon was a void. The United States had finally blinked. Under immense pressure from the mounting death toll, the coastal cities had finally been ordered to dim out. The bright advertising signs were gone, streetlights were hooded, windows were draped in heavy black fabric, the navigational buoys were extinguished, and the lighthouses stood blind and dark. "Nothing, Herr Kalin," the watch officer reported. "It is like looking into the inside of a sack." The ocean was no longer a shooting gallery, it was a wilderness again. Suddenly, a voice from the hydrophone room shattered the quiet. "Sound contact, propellers, fast screws, closing rapidly from the east." Hardened stiffened. 6 months ago, a sound contact meant a target. Now, fast screws meant only one thing: crash, dive, alarm. The bridge crew tumbled down the ladder. The alarm bell screamed through the boat. The bow of the U-123 pitched down, sliding beneath the waves just as a searchlight swept the spot where they had been floating seconds before. They were no longer the hunters, they were the prey. As the boat leveled off, the sound of the propellers grew louder. It was a mechanical thrumming that vibrated through the hull plates. This was a US Navy destroyer, and it was angry. A ping from the active sonar struck the hull like a hammer blow. It was the sound of being seen in the dark. "Silent running," Hardened whispered. "Rig for depth charges." The men in the control room froze. Then came the clicks of the detonators, followed by the boom. The ocean sledgehammered the boat. The lights flickered and died, plunging them into emergency red lighting. Dust rained down from the overhead pipes. They waited for hours as the destroyer circled above. When they finally surfaced hours later, the night was nearly over. Hardened climbed to the bridge, exhausted. He looked toward the American coast one last time. It was invisible. The Golden West had shut its doors. The initial slaughter was finished. The U-boats had sunk nearly 400 ships in 6 months, feasting on the arrogance of a nation that thought it was immune. But as Hardened watched the empty, dark horizon, he knew the easy war was gone. The giant had awakened. "Set course for Lorient," Hardened said quietly. "We are going home." The U-boat turned its bow east, slipping back into the vast, unforgiving Atlantic. Behind them, the American coast remained dark, silent, and ready for war.